My fifth great grandmother was listed as mulatto. Why did she choose to sell herself into servitude for 10 years? This wasn't just about labor, it was a desperate gamble to avoid the horrors of slavery. Her story reveals a raw, hidden side of American history, one that sheds light on the brutal choices faced by those living in the gray areas of racial identity.
A lot of the Texans, when they were trying to have that conflict with Mexico and like take territory, one of the biggest driving factors was the fact that they wanted slavery, but Mexico was outlawing slavery. So they had that clash all the time.
Hi, my name is Danielle Romero. Thank you so much for being with me here on my channel where we talk about American identity and family stories. And today we're going to talk to a Mexican genealogist I hired. His name is Juan, and he is amazing. He has been helping me untangle some of the Louisiana, Texas, Mexico parts of my family tree. And I'm going to give you his information. You could check him out, but he actually sent this huge PDF over to me, and it felt like Christmas morning, just full of documents. And I'm definitely going to hire him again. But today, we're going to talk about one document he found in particular, and it was one of my third great grandmothers or something. I'll have to check. But her name was Maria Procella, and she actually chose to become an indentured servant to a person that's a pretty big deal in Texas history, Elisha Clapp, and in order to save herself from some kind of a situation. And on census records, let me see if I can find the record, she was listed as mulatto. And so I wanted to talk with Juan just kind of about what he found on that record and a little bit about the family story on this side, because we're talking about Nacogdoches, Texas, Los Adias, places on the border between Texas and Louisiana before these borders were set in stone, so to speak. But let's jump over and say hi to Juan.
Hey, I'm Juan Zapata. I'm a born Mexican. I immigrated to the U.S. when I was 4 years old, and I got really interested in my roots in 2020 after I took a DNA test. That's what really got me on this whole deep dive, and I just wanted to find out my indigenous roots. So that's what made me get really good at genealogy. And after I did it for a while, then I started offering services, and then I started taking courses, and I got deeper into it. Now I service clients and I help people find whatever roots interest them, because I think it's really important to be able to know your background to truly understand yourself, because then you feel much more grounded if you understand where you come from.
Yeah, that gives me like shivers. That's how I feel. That's how I feel. And I was saying, I did a little intro before we got on. When you sent this thing over, Juan, it was like Christmas. Like I was like, I knew it was in my emails. Like, but I'm like, you can't look till the morning because you don't have time. And I couldn't wait to get into it. So the side of the family that you looked at is it was like kind of like the before Texas and Louisiana and Mexico were like concretely separated. Had you known anything about the history of that era before, or like was there anything surprising? Because a lot of my viewers, not all of them, but a lot of them do have roots like kind of from that area, and so we're kind of like trying to understand it better, you know.
Um, yeah, I didn't know too much of that area specifically. I did know somewhat about more of the southern area because I have ancestors that operated there. For example, I had ancestors that were, or one that was the governor of Coahuila in Texas when it was a state, back when it was Mexico. And so I had some familiarity with, like, let's say the Republic of the Rio Grande and that, because it pertains to my history. But learning about this area was fascinating because I was just seeing like the contention there was between like Mexico and then the American settlers that were trying to come in, like the new Texas settlers. So I thought that was fascinating learning about like Nacogdoches and then Natitoches, like how close in proximity they were. That was interesting to see on a map, especially when I looked it up. I was like, man, they were not that far apart at all.
Right.
And then I was just seeing that there's just a lot of rebellious activity in Nacogdoches, despite the fact that it was part of Mexican territory at the time. So I just thought that must have made it you know, such of a stressful place to live on. Probably that probably stressed some people out to live there.
Yeah, I think what's like crazy to me is I'm seeing it, and I was going into it with the view of like I studied American history in college. That was what I did, and just realizing like how little we understand about how these borders were formed and how just not hard and fast they have been, and where they're just not. You know what I mean? Like things kept moving back and forth, and I'm like, is my ancestor living in Mexico right now? Or are they in Texas? Or are they in Louisiana? are they just in no man's land? Literally, they're in nothing in between. I don't know. It's always good, I think, to understand what was happening not that long ago. But you found a document that, I mean, you found a lot of good documents, but you found one that really, my Procella line, which I don't know a lot about, and I still want to understand a little better. But you found this one. See if I pull it up. I printed them out. Yeah. Maria Procella and Elisha Clapp. Can you tell me about this document?
Oh yes, Maria Procella was your fifth great grandmother, and based off the documentation, the inferred caste that we can base it off of would have been that she was a mulata or that she was black, so she had some African ancestry. And I gave a summary of the document, but I actually got the document translated, and I can read it out for you if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be
But
amazing. That honestly, that'd be amazing.
All right. So April 30th, 1833, service contract between Alicia Clapp and Maria Pasella. It was her intimate will to offer 10 years of service, always ensuring that she retains full and peaceful freedom without the second party being able to enslave her at any time or under any circumstances. And the second party stated that being aware that the aforementioned Pasella is legally bound, she was like in some sort of court proceeding, some sort of litigation. He is obligated to deliver Posea if the matter is decided and she is proven to be a slave. So if that was the result, he was going to have to. I guess this agreement would be null and void, and he would have to turn her in.
Mhm.
And so that no one may later claim any misunderstanding, the first party grants her person, and the second party grants property of any kind. And for this purpose, they submit to the authority of the honorable judges, particularly those of this town, to ensure that what has been agreed upon is upheld and enforced with the agreement being regarded as a legally binding judgment. I signed for the first party with the mark of a cross, and the second party signs with me and the witnesses present as I testify. And then, has people's signatures down there.
That's so
So
crazy.
I think it's crazy the fact that she felt so pressured probably by what was happening around her and like the instability of the region of like what was going on with these countries because they had different laws. So for example, like Mexico had outlawed slavery by a certain point relatively early on when it obtained independence in 1821. But a lot of the Texans, when they were trying to have that conflict with Mexico and like take territory, one of the biggest driving factors was the fact that they wanted slavery, but Mexico was outlawing slavery. So they had that clash all the time. And
Right.
I feel like that's why she was stressed out. Maybe that's why she made this arrangement so she would retain that freedom.
That's right. It is amazing to me too, because I know that a lot of my family in this area, they're like, I don't know if you've heard the phrase red bone. And it's like kind of more of like a pejorative kind of thing in the Black community now. But before it was really these communities, like these triracial, isolate kind of communities. And so you have this lady, she's listed as mulatto, but she has a Spanish name. And I'm gonna have to like dig in a little bit into that and look into that. But it was interesting to me because one of the things that my mom's Graham always told people is that she was Spanish, and my aunt said that she always thought that meant like the family was from Spain because like we didn't know anything. And so it's been really exciting in some ways to like vindicate her that like yes, there is a lot of Spanish in her family. I had no idea that I had any Spaniards in my family tree at all, and there are a
Oh
lot.
yeah,
And
I
it's
bet
like,
that was like really fascinating to find out. Like, what's your perspective on that? Like, as like an American woman, like finding out you have Spanish ancestry, because that's something not many Americans have at all.
it's interesting because my husband's family, his dad is Puerto Rican and Mexican. He always told me that he's like, I think your family is Hispanic. Like when he met me, I was like, I don't think so. I don't think so. Like we're French and Italian. But it's been really interesting because I think a lot of people from this area probably have a lot of this ancestry, but for whatever reason, it's not one of the ones that was carried forward with the family stories. And I think you can kind of see why, because there's so much intermixing. It seemed like even people who were Spaniards, they were often marrying women who were not. And just, I think when people think Louisiana, they just think French. And just seeing that there is so much of this other influence. There's like so much Mexican, Spanish, influence. I think you said you had family from Coahuila, y Tejas. Like that's kind of like the same area.
Yes, it's really close by because I had family that were Spaniards that were operating, let's say during that time,
Yeah.
but they were over like San Antonio, like in that region. down further south. So, and then of course, like my family would have been involved, like indirectly in the sense that, like I said, I had that one ancestor that was governor for Coahuila in Texas, like
Yeah.
in 1834. So I thought that was crazy. Like he would have been administering this region while all the conflicts were going on at the same time. So,
Was that
so
Antonio
yeah.
Padilla or no?
No, his name was Francisco Vidaurri. That was
Okay.
his name.
Okay. Because there was another man that was a Padilla that was like a high ranking guy over there. And I remember there's this like Since Padilla in my family tree, just trying to like work through all of the last names
Yeah.
that aren't yours, but they're really similar. But I was just like so blown away by this. It was so comprehensive. It was so much better than I expected. Like, not that I didn't think it would be good, but like this was amazing. Tell me a little bit about working on your Indigenous ancestry. Were there any surprises that you found? How did it like reframe how you were seeing yourself? Because you're saying like it grounds you. It does.
Right. What was surprising is this is what happens with like a lot of Mexicans because of the national discourse, let's say, right? A lot of Mexicans will think that they descend from the Aztecs, but that's actually not, that's like a misconception. Most of them will descend from indigenous groups from varying regions, and there was many tribes and groups. So what was surprising to me was when I started digging into it that as a northern Mexican, like if anybody knew about like let's say the history, they would be like, well, of course you're really not Aztec, like you're from northern Mexico. But because of the dominant discourse, most people don't really look into it or think about it. So when I started tracing it, I found out I descended from like primarily from the Guachicil people, which were these Arab American indigenous warriors from like northern Mexico. They operate in like a semi-nomadic fashion, and they have their own like style. They actually fought the Spanish in a war that lasted for 50 years, and they like stonewalled them for a long time. So, but nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about like that fierce indigenous resistance. They always talk about how the Aztecs fought the Spaniards and then they got defeated, and they act
Right.
like everything else was like conquered immediately after, but that's not how the history one's really complex, right? So
Yeah.
that's what I thought was interesting is, oh, so I descend from these other warriors. I have like nothing to do with Aztecs. So I think that's what was cool is like finding out like the real history you pertain to, right?
Oh, it's amazing. Things are so much more mixed than I think we have been taught. Now, with some of the stuff that you gave me, I'm like, I can see it. Like I just had no idea there was, so much Spaniard influence, but then also like there's the African element, and then there's like the indigenous element, and there's the French element. Um, I don't know. It's been really beautiful to see like being connected to people who maybe necessarily wouldn't see me as being from the same family tree as them, if you know what I mean. Like that has been really awesome. Were there any other ones that, not to put you on the spot and I can cut this up, but I didn't know if there were any other ones, things that you found that were interesting in this or like that you wanted to speak on?
Oh, so I think one thing that was crazy was that you had an ancestor here. Okay, I had to pull them up here on the report, but Jose Patricio Padilla, who had a bison stolen from him in 1792, as well as three or four horses. I thought that was the most insane. That was one of the wildest stories I had. And then I looked at the thief story because they had a whole report on him. But I just thought it was insane to see that. You know, I was like, what the hell was going on? Like in Nacogdoches during this time, like, it's crazy.
All right. Yeah, I want to go over that one because it was so funny. And I have to tell you, like, this is like just an aside. My favorite animal in the whole world is a bison. Like, I always go to bison farms to just like look at them and trim. I love that. When I saw this, I laughed out loud in the kitchen. I was reading it. Yeah, tell me about this, what you found. Because I never saw this document until you sent it. So
Okay, so there's this guy just going around. He would break into people's houses. He would steal everything. And just I don't know why he. I mean, I guess he was poor, so that's why he kept doing all this stuff. But yeah, he did victimize your ancestor. He stole the bison. Your ancestor must have been pretty well off though to have a bison and three or four horses in that time period. I'm pretty
mm,
sure he had some money. Like, but he stole that. Then he fled town, and then they said that some Native Americans like recognized them and they reported him to the authorities, and then he got caught, and then he broke out again, like this thief broke out again and was like running away. So he literally escaped multiple times, and every single time he escaped he would be stealing stuff from people.
like a bison. Those are,
I don't even. I have
I
no idea how you even managed it.
it's like so wild. I just love though, like the way that like the picture you're painting, because like I knew that was like kind of contentious over there, but I think having stuff like this where it's just a free for all. It's a total free for all. I don't know. It's like it was such a Wild West feeling when you're putting this report together. And I just appreciate so much like how you did this. You made it so easy for me to understand and print it out. It was just beautiful. Like thank you so much. And I hope that we can send lots of people your way um, to do this because you did such an excellent job. And I'm really
I,
grateful.
I really appreciate it. 'Cause I think that's one thing that I was worried about is like, oh, like, if you don't frame the information right, it could just be really overwhelming and then people don't know what they're looking at.
No, it was
Yeah.
great. And I loved, I think my favorite thing, I mean, you just did such a great job, but just like having big printed things like this is amazing. Because I started printing out documents too, just because I don't know, I feel like everything being digital is kind of nice, but I don't know, sometimes I just want to like have it and see it. And so you did such a great job. And I hope that we can keep like doing stuff together. And I'm so appreciative. So yeah, so now I have to decide like, do I check Hispanic off on boxes from now on? Probably not. I don't know.
I did have a question for you
Yeah.
regarding this. So like that sixth grade grandfather, the one that was the victim of that crime, Jose Patricio Padilla, he on here, I mean, it did show that he was a soldier. He ended up taking a billet for his father, which would have been your seventh grade grandfather. I guess they were just required to serve in that area. So what's your reaction to like your ancestors having been like Spanish soldiers at that time here in the late 1700s? What do you think?
It's really interesting because I think it's easy to jump immediately and be like to feel like a lot of shame, I think, for things that you think they may have done or may not have done. Them coming over, them coming over kind of like sight unseen into this world and how it has so drastically changed and created this like Hispanic culture. And I didn't even know that I didn't know my family had any part of it. No idea at all. I'm gonna have to sit with it and think about it.
So yeah, I'm about like half Spanish genetically or half Iberian.
Mhm.
But I found a lot of them. There's always a lot of nuances with the stories. So for example, a
Yeah.
lot of the ones that you'll find from northern Mexico, and then they also went to Texas. Is a lot of those Spaniards were actually not all of them, but a lot of them were crypto Jews. They were Sephardic Jews, and so
Mm.
back then in the 1500s, they were trying to flee the Inquisition. So a lot of them fled to northern Mexico. It was actually kind of known as more of a Sephardic Jewish like enclave, although it was beneath the water like this, because if
Yes.
the Spanish authorities knew, they would try to persecute them with the Inquisition. But so a lot of those people, it's a complex story. Like some of them actually were just trying to flee Spain themselves. Some of them were just regular
Mm.
Spaniards. Then there was other groups. There was a lot of people that were Basque from a specific region in Spain. There was also Portuguese people because I've traced and I descent from that, which is shocking because you wouldn't think like Portuguese people. You associate that with Brazil and other area.
That's why I like diving into the story of like the ancestor. You know, it's like it's interesting to think about, okay, well, what happened with the Spanish and the indigenous people? Okay, that's a story. But what about like your ancestor? What did your ancestor do? Um, and I've obviously some of our ancestors like we're not super proud of. But I think a lot of the stories you just see like a person trying to survive events bigger
Definitely.
than them, you know?
Definitely. I think yours here in this, from the context I can see, I think they were just really just part of a garrison force. I don't think they were doing anything besides just trying to maintain order and keep the peace, if anything, from what I could gather with the documents.
It's just, it's so honestly, I don't know. I think it's kind of cool to be a part of such an old story. And I always think like with these some of the the good, the bad, the ugly, like if those things didn't happen, you and I wouldn't be sitting here having a conversation, and that always just blows me away, you know? Um, so I'm just like I'm grateful in some ways. I'm grateful in some ways for that for sure. Well, this was super
Thank,
cool. Thank you so much. And we'll
thank
definitely
you
do it
for
again.
everything.
You're welcome. All right, we'll talk soon. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.